Waters podcast, where Mainers tell their stories, unfiltered.
Good afternoon, Maine. This is Chuck Ellis, and you are watching the Muddy Waters podcast. As always, the Muddy Waters podcast exists to help the people of Maine better understand what's going on here in our state, as well as knowing and understanding who it is that's representing them, why, and all that kind of stuff. Give you an opportunity to get to know some other people from around the state as we share, again, what's happening at our state. Unfortunately, the mainstream media does not seem to desire to share what's actually going on and wants to remain a propaganda arm of the left, which is part of the reason we exist. I like to say that I would rather not be here. But because this is where we are, this is where I got to be. So today we are fortunate to have with us a Representative Paul Flynn of House District 1. I was going to say 163, but there are not that many House districts. But House District 63. Thanks for joining, Paul.
Thank you, Chuck. It's a joy to be here.
Yeah. We've been having a great conversation before we even went on, so we've already had a great conversation. But so obviously, as I was kind of sharing with you, that part of what I like to do with this is when I have somebody on for the first time is, getting people an opportunity to get to know who you are, where you come from, and what in the world possessed you to enter into the political realm in the midst of this incredibly divided time in our nation's history. I mean, I think probably definitely one of the most divided times in our country's history. We're not currently at war with ourselves, but we seem to be ideologically pretty much there.
It kind of seems we're at war with one another. But, these are also very exciting times, Chuck. I mean, out of this adversity will come the change that needs to occur. So I'm House District 63, which geographically, for those who don't match that up, it is the towns of Winslow, Albion, Freedom, and then it doglegs to Unity Township, just north of Unity, between Unity and Benton. It's a district that was new, 2022. Albion is a very red town, always has been. Albion was in CD2. But in this new remapping, Albion is now part of CD1. We've been neutralized. And in addition to that, they took Albion, which was usually mapped with Benton and China as a House district. And in the redistricting, moved Albion into Winslow and then split it to Waldo County town of Freedom. So you get Albion, a very red town. You got Winslow, is about a 50-50. It's blue collar, mostly the Democrats there, mostly the older Democrats, but there's the new wave. And then Freedom is predominantly blue, but Freedom, I believe, twice has voted Trump. But it's in the Mofka area. It's more of the back to the earth type left. But great folks. It's a great district. I've lived in Albion for 35 years. It's a great town. But it's a good district to be in. It's handy enough to Augusta. We got the Waterville-Winslow thing happening. Winslow's a big town. Waterville's a big town. It's always been a bit overshadowed by Augusta. But it nonetheless coming to its own with Colby and other things that are happening. And Governor LePage being from the Waterville area has helped. But there's a good, strong conservative base in the area. But it's changing like Maine.
Yeah. So that's where you're from. So what and obviously, like, part of your role, and I kind of reference this in some of the titles of this episode, not the one that you see, but on other places in X, is that you're also like a pastor. And so, in being a pastor, choosing to get involved in the political realm in the is kind of interesting today, right?
It surely is. I've been the pastor of the Freedom Congregational Church for 9 years. I'll step back a bit. A bit of history is I've only been a Maine resident for 45 years. I came to Maine. I was a young man at the age of 18. I attended St. Joseph's College in North Windham, graduated from there in 1983. I was brought up in central Massachusetts in a very deep, wonderful, beautiful Irish Catholic Democrat family. And in those days, I'd gone to an all-boys parochial high school. In my teen years, I had felt this interesting calling, one might say, of a religious life. Of course, being Roman Catholic would have been the priesthood or brotherhood or something. But, and then went to St. Joseph's. It was in my senior year that I decided not to pursue a deeper walk into the Roman Catholic priesthood. On the advice of a dear friend, he was a Roman Catholic priest, first generation Italian from East Hartford. His name was Michael Massaro, and he was the college chaplain at the time. And Father Mike said to me my senior year something, Chuck, that clearly is stuck. And he said, Flinny, do not confuse the calling to the priesthood to God's on your life. Meaning God needs coaches, he needs fathers, he needs politicians as much as he might need quote unquote men of the cloth. So the St. Joseph's experience gave me what I needed, meaning I wanted to be in Maine. I'd been coming to Maine like many people as a younger person. My uncle had a place up in Rockwood on Moosehead. And I knew at a very tender age I wanted to be in Maine. And then having afforded the opportunity to go to St. Joseph's, I played baseball there for 4 years. Wonderful college. I got to give my alma mater a plug. Great people, and the Sisters of Mercy were wonderful. So to that end, I then launched a career after that. My first job out of college, I went to work for the Sportsmen's Alliance of Maine. In 1983, I was a 22-year-old assistant executive director involved with a small nonprofit organization that found itself in the middle of a statewide referendum to end moose hunting in Maine. Maine had its first experimental season, I believe it was in 1980. The biologists were able to gather the data they needed. 82, they did not have a season, or 81, they did not. 82, they had a regular season. 83 was the referendum. So I went to work for Sam in July of 83, stayed with them for about a year and a half to 2 years. It was an amazing summer of 83. I had every single fair in the state of Maine with a single man pup tent in a 1979 Plymouth Horizon. It was awesome. I got to see the entire state, Kittery to Fort Kent. And then after a period of time, we married young, had a child, and I was like, there's not a lot of money in nonprofits. Set my sights on my degree. Got a job with what was then the Merrill Trust Company in Bangor, Maine. Worked in Newport from 85 through 89. In 1986, Merrill Trust, Merrill Bank Shares was acquired by Fleet Financial Group. It was the first interstate banking transaction after the Glass-Steagall was repealed under the Reagan administration. So that was the first play, Chuck. That was the chessboard move that started the entire interstate banking move that we saw in our lives for about 20 to 25 years. So in 1990, Fleet asked me if I would go to Portland. I did, as the regional vice president for York and Cumberland counties. I was there for about a year, not even a year, when Fleet announced that it was acquiring the assets of Maine Savings Bank. And at the same time, there was the failure of the Bank of New England, which was Maine National Bank. So I found myself in Portland for a couple of years, mostly doing mergers, acquisitions, consolidating branches, so on and so forth. And then in 1991, Fleet moved me back to Waterville at my request to get the heck out of Portland. And that was
that was Portland in the 90s, I think.
That's when Portland was 90. I'm just not a big city guy. So I ended up in Waterville, which was awesome. Worked for Fleet through 97. Fleet through its deeper consolidations. It was a brutal time to be in banking in Maine. We were closing banks. We were closing branches. We were consolidating. We were laying people off. I was anything but a banker at that point. So set my sights in a smaller bank. I went to work for United Bank in Bangor, a wholly owned subsidiary of Camden National Corp at the time. I was the senior vice president in charge of retail banking. And I could tell even the politics and just the timing of banking and its change was beyond where I was willing to stick with. So knowing that, I'm sorry.
If you don't mind, so I don't know if you were aware. So I actually worked for 15 years in banking, starting in 2009. Interesting time to enter banking, obviously, after what had happened in 2008. And it's interesting that you're bringing up the Glass-Steagall Act and how, because and this like interstate banking thing, which I think everybody loves the convenience that's come along with that, but I think there's a lot that's been lost.
Chuck,
I think like local control, local business decisions, like there's so much. I think the corporatization of America is what I sometimes call it, is one of the biggest problems that we have as our society, where most of our wealth is being controlled by a few people in California, and whether it's the banks or whether it's technology or whatever it is. Some people want to say that this is what capitalism is and this is where capitalism leads, but I think this is capitalism without a seatbelt, which is not how our founders, I think, designed our country.
Separate off ramp, but capitalism without a seatbelt is called $37 trillion in debt. You cannot take a capitalistic economy and continue to stimulate it with fake money.
Yeah.
It's not capital, it's debt.
Yeah.
Boom, plain and simple. And once you put a debt equity into the equation, it's far different than an equity in the equation.
Yeah.
Completely different ballgame. But to your point, Chuck, I'm going to take us back. This was not that long ago. Back in the day when I was trained to be a banker, you were trained to be a banker. You had to be an economist. You had to be a real estate expert. When you came into me for a mortgage loan, I had to know everything that we had to offer you. At the same time, I did the application. Guess what? I did the appraisal, the inspection. The local attorney did the work, and we did the closing. All right there. Trained to do all of that. Our economy and our educational system has become deeply specialized, including look at our medical. Everything is specialist. There's no more generalist. So to that point, what happened was banking started to change, and then what Glass-Steagall also did, and I'll call it the elephant in the room. Let's look at the capital that gets sucked out of our local communities. Let's look at the small banks. Granted, they might have only had in $1980 $15 or $20 million in deposit, but the models would say that branch can no longer be profitable given the current investment strategies. So I do believe we've seen a mass amount of capital sucked out of our communities that normally would have been leveraged and invested right back in, and we've lost the local control. And don't get me wrong, I'm not dissing our local banks. We have great local banks in Maine, and I'm going to lump credit unions in there as well. They're very community conscious. They meet all of their Community Reinvestment Act requirements very well. They meet all of their lending requirements that's needed for reporting as it relates to Finance Authority of Maine and FAME and VA and all of that. But that middle level, that mezzanine capital level of entrepreneurship that you might find in a local banking structure has gone. It's literally gone.
Yeah.
So to that end, let me come back full circle. So in 1997, and I said enough of banking. 1999, actually, I quit my job and I bought a general store in Freedom, Maine. And there, Chuck, from age 37 to age 55, I lived a glorious life. I mean, to own a general store in Waldo County, Maine for all those years, and just the local flavor, the local color, the deer seasons, I mean, everything. It was a magical time and it was wonderful. But Maine was also changing in that period. We had a lot of the drugs hit our rural areas about 20 years ago. It came through like a tidal wave. And that was very difficult. But what I found, Chuck, in owning a general store in a rural community in America is you might as well be the pastor. You're dealing with a lot of people's stuff. And you're dealing with a lot of emotion. You're dealing with a ton of humanity every single day. So it would have been back around 2010, 2012. I had left the Roman Catholic Church for very private reasons. I was pretty much searching for something. I never left my faith. I never left my Lord. I would spend a lot of time in self-study. I spent a lot of time just in that meditative prayer and contemplation. And in 2012, I ordained through a private church in down south. It was predominantly former Catholics. And many of us were just affirming our faith in God, affirming the fact that we have lived a life within a religion that we no longer want to follow or don't feel comfortable following. And I became ordained, and it was about the same time my dad had passed. My dad was a very important person in my life. And Dad died at 76 after an 18-year battle with Parkinson's. And it's kind of a tribute to my dad and the spirituality and the personhood that he brought me up to be. I became ordained. And someone at the store found out about it because it was shortly after I sold the store. I had got a call from one of the elders at the church in Freedom, and they were expressing to me how the church was struggling. The pastor had retired, attendance was low, and she wanted to ask me a question. I actually thought they were asking for a donation, but she said, "No, Paul, we've talked about it. We'd like you to be our pastor." So there it's been. Chuck, it's been 9 years. It's been phenomenal. It's been awesome. It's been a spiritual springboard for me to go to a deeper level of faith and understanding of God, of Christ, and what is required of us as Christians. So, yeah, I'm a pastor of a church, and then the decision to jump into politics was one of great discernment. We all hear of, geez, the separation of church and state and all this stuff. Well, there is no separation of church and state. That's someone read it somewhere in a book and said, well, let's call it this. No, a Christian cannot separate their brain from the daily affairs. Jesus makes it very clear to Peter when Peter had made the comment in Matthew when Jesus asked, who am I? And Peter was the one that said, you are the Messiah. And Jesus said, Peter, bless you, son of Jonah. You got it, man. That knowledge could not have come from a man. That came from the Holy Spirit of the God in you. And then God said, I'm going to build my church upon you. Well, that doesn't mean the cornerstone of a church. It means upon that consciousness, upon that knowledge that we are divine human beings, that we are a spark of God and reconnected to the Spirit of the Christ. So that endeavor, this church endeavor in Freedom, has allowed me to go deeper into that, and then the understanding in politics. And one of the things I had mentioned to a number of people early on, and I've shared this with both Billy Bob and Trey and anyone who will care to listen to the comment, is as I was discerning politics, life, 3 children, 2 sons who've just recently moved back to Maine, 8 grandchildren, in politics. And why would I want to be involved in that? And in that discernment of being, yes, it's time because we're called. And when you've got 8 grandchildren now within the state of Maine and you see what's happening, and you know that there's a divine power in all of what's happening, and you step into it, it becomes an answering of a call, I think, Chuck, that a lot of people hopefully will begin to hear and step forward. Because the run into politics it's you know what it is, Chuck. It's not easy. But to bring levels of faith into this very dark place at times is very hard. I do see God in this. I do. And I see a great spirit within our caucus. I see a great spirit within many people. But just a very confusing and brutal time right now as we become more and more divided.
Yeah, no, it's definitely very challenging right now in a lot of ways. And it's one of my favorite questions to ask: why in the world would you get involved in politics in the here and now? And this is exactly when I have. So I know what motivated me. I just always want to know what motivates other people. And I think I think it's actually, it typically tends to be the more difficult times where people rise to the surface. You think of like World War II, and you had the people who volunteered and went to fight that war, right? Were people that wouldn't have probably been in the military, a lot of them, right, had it not been for the moment that they knew that they needed to rise to the moment. And so this is where people who are ready for a challenge and want to do what they can to save their state and save their country step up. And I think,
well, Chuck, I see it like this: is every generation of Americans, every single generation has had to answer a call. We've had to. World War II generation. I mean, every generation has had to answer a call. And I see this as just that right now. We are at a point in this country that it's time to answer the call. And through much discernment, I made a bold move as a first session legislator. I have established a political action committee, not to advance Paul Flynn, the politician. I'm okay being one and done, but I am going to run another term because it's answering the call. And I've started a political action committee and I've named it Answering the Call. Where I was going earlier and I lost my track was in the discernment, in the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 10, verse 16, God spoke to my heart. That scripture reads as follows. As Jesus was instructing the disciples of what their life might look like after he left, he said, I am sending you as sheep among wolves. You must be as cunning as the serpent, but as loving as the dove. And I struggled with that one, but it spoke to me, Chuck, and the context is, yeah, we are sheep among wolves. It's an innocence amongst a very corrupt time.
Mm-hmm.
And it creates and requires very guttural responses to different situations in which one might find themselves in, and using all of our human skills to bring us into the political realm. But knowing when you're facing a quote unquote opponent or a moment of anger or a moment of fear, that we must reach deep within the spirit of ourselves to remain calm and to present the love of Christ in everything that we're doing, in conversing with that person. And that's hard. That's very, very hard thing to do. But at the same time, I think there's room and I think there's time for Christians to jump in unabashedly, not in any fervent, crazy way, but in a way of being just very firm in our conviction of who we are. I'll make no bones about it. I'm a man of God. I love the Christ. And I love the fact that we have a place called religion, called a place to go to get comfort from this world. As our Lord said, be in it, don't be of it. So yeah, it's been an interesting walk, Chuck, and I can't use the vernacular or language I might have used at my store in a more open setting, but it's okay. So yeah, I mean, I've started a political action committee. I'm helping, like you, to recruit people, conservatives. I mean, I'll even talk to an independent if they're conservative. I just want a conservative. We need conservative people that understand the danger of where we're going with our economics, where we're going with our environmental policies. I mean, Woodland Mill is just shutting down for 6 weeks. There's 800 to 1,000 loads of logs go in there, or wood goes in there a day. That's now done. I mean, has anyone done a model on what's going to happen to the local economy if the Sappi Mill closes? What's the land values in Albion going to do if Sappi closes? Yeah. We're heartbeats away from these things that we need to be talking about. And to the point you and I spoke of earlier, we need a resurgence of our youth. And when I'm saying, listen to me, when I'm saying youth, I'm talking 30s and 40s. I mean, people to get involved in politics, to see this as worth saving, to see what life Maine has shared with so many people for so many generations can continue to happen. But there has to be the seat at the table for everyone. And the partisan politics, I say to my Democratic colleagues, guys, come on. What would you be saying to me right now? What would you be looking me in the eye and saying if you knew that for 6 years, half your constituency has had no say in this budget? None. What would you say to me? It's frustrating. And then you come back out into your district and you have to hear, the struggle, not just of folks that need public assistance, but the people that are paying the bills, Chuck. I say to someone, okay, that person, they're not going to get their food stamps this week, maybe, but guess what? 2 doors down, there's a couple going to bed tonight that have lived there for 40 or 50 years that are wondering if they're going to be able to live there next year because they can no longer afford to pay their property taxes. And until we can sit down at a table and say, we're all in this together, this division, this divide is going to continue to cause deeper division. But within the Republican caucus, we are ready to talk. There are Republicans that want to move this forward. And if we're not going to be heard, we're going to do all we can. I'm going to do all I can to help get other people elected. Because how many votes did we miss by one on that floor? And I'm sitting there going, oh my goodness, 2 votes. We could have had that one.
Yeah.
We got to get folks in. So I'll be quiet.
No. It's all really, really great stuff. I mean, we were so close. 61 votes. I think we would have controlled the House. And you're right. We're basically not represented. Conservatives. This is one of the interesting things about the way politics work. Is like we can get people elected and you're quote unquote represented, but you have no power unless you have the majority. And it used to be like that they would pass bipartisan budgets, they would work together. But now, as long as they have the control, they don't care about what the other side has to say. And so they are, playing shenanigans. And one of the concerns that I have sometimes is that like the people on our side say that we should do the same thing, that when we, assuming we do get back in power, that we should play these same games and we should pass a single party budget and all that other kind of stuff, which I don't think we should do. But one of the challenges here is it's not, because I've talked to people. I talked to like Jim Libby, I think back during Senator Libby, I should say, back during the budget process. I talked to Jack Ducharme during during the supplemental budget process before, because like they were negotiating this year with the supplemental budget, but they didn't do any negotiations with the actual biennial budget. They just, the Democrats just basically did that all on their own once they didn't get everything that they wanted. And what's interesting is like conservatives are sometimes like, man, our people like give in too much. This is what the concern is of the voters at home, is that like there's too much of a desire to negotiate. Partly why they feel that way is that the other side doesn't, when they negotiating is just us losing things. We're not really gaining per se what we really want. It just isn't as bad as what they want to do, if that makes sense, which I guess is better than the alternative, but it's still not where we really want. And I remember I was talking to Jack, and he was talking about some of the ways that they were the negotiations and things like that, and I just thought, man, I feel like that's further than I want to go. And so it's interesting is like we talk about this growing divide in America, and it seems to me, again, you're there in the midst of it, but it seems to me that the growing divide is largely because one side has gone crazy and very, very far away from center, and the other side has largely stayed where it was, and if anything, has actually drifted a little bit to the left. I'm not saying that our people are leftists, but there are people that are currently part of our caucus that never would have been welcomed in 10 years ago because they were too moderate or left. I think of
something as simple as someone in favor of cannabinoid. They would have been pushed out the door.
Right, and we've embraced them in. So we've actually, in that sense, we've moved more center as a party, and yet we're being blasted as being far right.
Yes.
And as though that's where I get so frustrated. Like both sides are getting more extreme, and I'm like, that's not actually true.
No, there's no extreme. I mean, here's I got my lesson all of 6 hours into this thing. I'm sitting in the House floor. We're newly sworn in, and we're electing constitutional officers. So I'm watching how this whole thing's playing out. Now, the Republicans, I believe, for the Secretary of State, we nominated a gentleman who was just honored by the Maine State Chamber of Commerce, Sowen Millet. We nominated that man as Secretary of State for the state of Maine. Served 9 governors, every party, including independents. This is the man that we nominate, the person we nominate to be the Secretary of State of Maine. The Democratic Party put up Shenna Bellows. So I'm sitting there, Chuck, in my complete naivety. I mean, I'm Opie on Andy Griffith, and I'm thinking, all right, cool. The Democrats have all said they want to be bipartisan. They're going to work with us. This is cool. Let's see what decision they make. Because, again, if I'm a CEO in a bank or a business, and I need to hire someone for a job, and I'm looking at 2 resumes, it's a no-brainer. We got the perfect candidate right here. Who's our Secretary of State, Chuck? It took me 6 hours, Chuck, to figure out there's no such thing in their vocabulary as bipartisan outside of saying it.
Yeah.
Which it's nothing but saying.
It's a good talking point.
Bingo. But then put it on the table. And I'm sitting there and I'm saying, okay, Paul, newly elected, let's see if if they're true. Are they going to be bipartisan? Are they going to elect the right person for this job? Or are they going to play a partisan game of launching Shenna for a deeper career in politics? Well, we all know what the answer is. They don't want to play.
Yeah. I mean, even after this is after the debacle, right, where she literally tried to keep the former president and current sitting president from being able to be on the ballot, and to this day, defends that decision. And so partisanship is which was, I mean, obviously, like, there was no legitimate argument to barring Trump from the ballot.
Right.
And she knew that, like, literally all that was a campaign tactic for what she knew she was eventually going to run for, which is governor.
Right.
And that's all that it was. And that's what's, it's sad that we're in a state where, and a state both in, not just physically one of the states, right, but like in a state in our society where that's what's happening in one party, and yet somehow the other party is being called extreme, right? The Republicans are being called extreme and partisan, and like, we, as you pointed out, we nominated somebody who had been working with many administrations, all administrations, and they nominated somebody who is a partisan, very clear partisan candidate. Same thing for their, Aaron Fry, who is the AG, right? Who, instead of like cracking down on crime, is spending his days suing Christians for preaching outside of abortion clinics.
And we've got dead Chinese nationals in houses in freedom.
Yeah,
in the same moments.
And also, he's also suing oil companies that don't have any operations in the state of Maine for climate change. I don't like, what is this guy doing? So this is the state of our state, so to speak. It's really sad that this is, because like, when I first started engaging in political conversations and getting involved in starting to run for office, like, I remember hearing people talk about Janet Mills and the Democrats is how it was a lot of times phrased. I actually remember the former chair of the party, Joel Stetkes, came to a Portland meeting, and he's like, Janet Mills and the Democrats, and just kept talking about them. And I was like, I don't. First of all, that didn't play very well in Portland in general, but like, it seemed partisan, right? And I think like, one of the problems that I had was not realizing how kind of how radical they've become, if that makes sense. And so there isn't really a lot of opportunity to be, nonpartisan, and the Democrats just have gone so corrupt. Like, again, I wouldn't want to say that. And one of the things that's interesting is I always, I'm fearful of of not saying this enough, that I'm not talking about Democrat voters. Right. We're talking about the elected officials at just about every level. There are some like honest individuals who are just trying to make the world a better place and operate from a different ideology than I do. But the vast majority of the people on the Democrat side are not that,
Exactly. Right.
And even though their voters may be, and it's one of the things where I kind of feel bad for Democrat voters, because they operate under assumption of good faith assumption of their representatives.
Well, it's interesting that spawned a thought was a conversation I had. I was probably 3 or 4 months into it. It was during a committee. We had a break from a committee hearing. And I can't remember what bill it was, but I was speaking with one of my colleagues who was a Democrat. And we were talking of this issue and another issue, and I was sharing where I was coming from on it. And she asked me, she said, "Well, you're a pastor." And I said, "Yes." And then I was sharing just different thoughts on different issues. One, I believe, was the morning after pill. And I don't know, maybe 10 minutes into the conversation, Chuck, she looked at me and she said, "Why are you even a Republican?" And it caught me off guard because I was saying nothing that was liberal or so. No, it was very firm, very base conservatism. But I thought on that one, and it dawned on me, it was not necessarily what I was saying, but her preconceived notion of who we Republicans are and what makes us click and where we come from and all of this stuff that has been fed to people over the last number of years. And the one I was going to mention too is a couple of weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, is one of the No Kings rally days. I try not to look at social media a whole lot, but someone had shared a picture that someone had taken of someone that I knew, and they were going to a No Kings rally. And they had a sign up and it said something like, "All you fascists." And I'm like, it really hit a very ugly chord in that we now live in a world, and I've had this conversation with people, that not only do they have now convinced themselves that our president is a fascist, but we're entering into that very muddy water where the 75 million people that follow him are also now fascists. Because here's a man in a small Waldo County town, bold enough to put a picture on a social media site that is calling anyone who follows a conservative agenda a fascist. That is what we're up against. And then in trying to have a conversation with a colleague, and all of a sudden it's like, wait a minute, well, why did you say that to me? Because what, you're preconceived that I'm some hate-filled bigot? I'm a misogynist waiting to shoot every immigrant I see? Is that what you're convinced I am? Because that's what the social media and that's what our media has told people conservatism is. And that's not a true story. Yeah. But for us Republicans, for us Christians, they don't hear words anymore. The only thing you can do is it's how you act with them. And when we attack them as they attack us, it's just fueling that fire. And the difficult part, friend, is restraining, because you don't to keeping that anger in, because you're looking at these folks and it's like, come on, man, you can't really believe that, but they do.
There's so many things that it troubles me that people believe. I wish I was surprised, and I am surprised, and I'm also not surprised at the same time about the things that people are willing to believe. Like, so for instance, I have a good friend who's a liberal. Yes, a good friend who is a liberal. Both of those things are true.
That's okay. I got a bunch of liberal friends.
well, I just feel like so much we've gotten siloed in our society. We stop talking to people who disagree with us, and I think that that's dangerous for us long term. But I get together with this guy, and I remember talking to him. I don't remember when it was. It might have been after the 2024. It probably wasn't after the 2024 election. It was probably sometime between when Trump was shot, when they tried to kill him. And like he's like, I don't think he really believed this, but like I think they talk about this thing called Blue Anon. It's like QAnon but for Democrats, right? Where people believe things that are kind of crazy. Right, like and sorry if you're out there and you believe in QAnon, that's what I think about you as well. There's some truth in some of the stuff that goes around under QAnon, I think, but like there's a lot of nonsense in it as well. I mean, then there's just stuff I just don't care about, like did we land on the moon or not. I just don't care, actually, like, because if the answer is we didn't land on the moon and the government's lying to us, it's like, well, I already know the government's lying to me, so yeah, I don't. This doesn't actually help the conversation at all. Outside of it, just another lie. But if it makes me look crazy to to make a point that I don't need to make, why am I going to go down that path? I'm happy to look into it, but it doesn't matter. It's not relevant to the current situation. But one of the things that this guy was saying is he believed that, and I think there are people on our side that believe this, but he believed that the Trump assassination attempt was staged. That it wasn't real. It was just, it was fake. And I was like, well, people died. So, and again, like, there's just like, so yeah, the things that people will believe. And I think to your point about that woman, one of the things I find is really interesting is I think what you're seeing there is like, whoever, I think this was a woman, I think you said, saw you as being a good person. Like your demeanor and your behavior, you're a nice person. Like, how could you possibly be a Republican?
How can you be a conservative?
Yeah, how can you be conservative if you're nice and you care about people? That doesn't make any sense, because what they've been spoon fed and what they've bought into is that anybody who doesn't agree with them is evil and awful and horrible, right? And again, hates immigrants. I just like to sometimes point out, like, my situation. My wife is not here yet. We're still waiting. Hopefully she'll be here in another couple of months. But like, my story also baffles them. I remember I was at a pro ICE rally, a counter protest to the anti-ICE rally when I went to in Scarborough, and one of the reporters came up and somebody pointed them to come in my direction, and I was like, oh boy. I used to be. I'm getting less nervous now. The day after this most recent election, I was just talking very openly to somebody who works for the Maine Trust for Local News, and I got reported in the Portland Press Herald. They accurately quoted me as claiming that Shenabello's wording of question one might as well have been, do you want to murder puppies? And I stand by that. So they accurately quoted me, but I used to be more, and I remember at this point I was like, I don't really want to talk to the press. What if they catch me in not catch me in something, but you know what I mean? Like, I don't respond the right way and they twist it, but they didn't report on anything that I had to say. I think partly because they don't know what to do with me, right? Like, you're talking about immigration. I'm actually going through the immigration process, trying to bring my wife here.
Amen.
And they, I think it's just like, wait a second, then why are you for ICE? And it's like, to me, I'm kind of baffled at them that you don't think it's a good idea to have a process whereby we bring people into the country to make sure it's done in an orderly fashion and to make sure that we're taking care of our citizens first, since that's what our government's for, is actually for the benefit of our citizens. Do we want to be altruistic? Sure, but first and foremost, we need to take care of our own citizens. And when our veterans, for instance, are living on the streets and we have all these people dealing with drug addiction issues, and they're out there, and we don't have the resources to help them. We don't really have the capacity to bring in 20 million people from outside our country, or whatever the number is. And so anyway, it's well,
I think
it's interesting.
You're touching on. I mean, it's called immigration policy,
right?
And here I am. I'm 64 years old. Someone please tell me what the energy policy of the United States has been on 10-year increments in 1960. I mean, what did we want to end up being? There's no planning in any of this.
Right.
But I was going to the comment, Chuck, on the immigrant. It's that one continues to baffle my mind in the context that, I mean, my great grandfather came here in 1895. It wasn't like he was here on the Mayflower. We're all in some capacity immigrants,
Yeah.
and we all came for the same reason. They were trying to get away from something and enter into freedom.
Yeah.
And I'll never forget this. I was probably in my 30s. So, yeah, we're talking early 1990s, 80s, 90s. We were up at hunting camp. My dad had come up, and we were all, cousins, and we're having the beers and we're having a great time, and conversation goes to politics or whatever. And the conversation came up of immigrants. So there's a few comments were said, and then my dad, who was not a man of a lot of words, he just kind of clears his throat. No, here he is. He was born in 1935. And he says, gentlemen, let me remind you all of something. And what he said is all of us being second generation Irish immigrant, what he said to us was, gentlemen, it wasn't that long ago that we were the Mexicans, meaning the Irish felt the brunt of discrimination in this country, both for the fact that they were Irish and they liked to drink, and that they were Roman Catholic. I mean, it was not an easy row for many, many immigrants. So when we start talking,
I'm confused though. I'm confused, Paul. I'm led to believe that the only form of racism or discrimination is white people against other people.
Oh, come on, man. I mean, yeah, well, that's what exactly. Hey, I got the one. You know what? Listen, what was this thing they had a few years ago? The critical race theory.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, well, I got one. Critical grace theory.
Oh, nice. I like it.
Let's talk about the fact that let's invite God back into this equation. Regardless of what denomination you want to call yourself, let's at least have an understanding there's a deity of a God first. And let's move forward. One there's parameters and there's laws assigned to that human card that you happen to carry. So yeah, I mean, these are some pretty interesting issues, but the divisiveness, Chuck, we talked a bit earlier, the Charlie Kirk thing.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm an old guy. I don't watch any social media to speak of. I mean, I've heard of Charlie Kirk. I knew who he was. I found he had a great influence on young Republicans and Christians. But after the assassination, and I will call it the martyrdom of that man.
Yeah.
I went back and I listened intently to much of what he has said in many different settings and many different venues. I didn't find any hate in there. I found direction. I found compassion and love for his fellow human beings. And for this man to have met the fate that he met, I'll say to you what I'll say to anyone as it relates to conspiracy theories in Mr. Kirk. And there's nothing that could happen right now or say to me that would surprise me. There's such a grip of darkness and confusion in this world right now. There's nothing that would surprise me. And our Lord says that. It's going to be a very confusing. Yeah. Right from wrong, wrong from right. People will no longer know. And our Lord makes it very clear, and I have to carry these words with me every day into that place. Be in this world, but do not be of it. Because the of it's are really messing it up.
Yeah.
And those of us that just want to be in it and live are feeling the brunt of that pain, Chuck, and you know what that is. Yeah. So to the extent that I have answered the call to leave my idyllic life, I said to my brother, I got a brother, we're Irish twins, he lives in Skowhegan. I said to him one day, I said, Dennis, I said, did you really think we'd be dealing with this? And I don't know if I'm going to get beeped here, but this, and pardon me, I won't say the word poop, when we were in our 60s. And he's like, no, Paul, and I said, Dennis, I thought when we were in our 60s, we'd be retired. We'd be driving around up north, having a cold beer, shooting birds, hoping of a next deer season and talking of the deer seasons past, following the Red Sox and complaining about government. But look what we're living in. Look what has happened. And I can't, personally, I just can't sit back, Chuck. I mean, call it the Irishman in me. I got to get in and throw a punch and then run the other way. But I think the time has come for many of us to answer some calling, to be involved in our communities, to be involved in politics, wherever we feel we're being guided to go. Because it's going to be all oars in the water. This ship of Maine is, when all this budget stuff comes home, when all the green stuff comes home, and God love those folks for trying to do the right stuff, but it's going to require some diligence and some leadership.
Well, it is, and unfortunately, there is this everything that I hear. So hopefully nobody gets offended at this, because this is what I'm hearing from people. So this is what the people feel. This is not Chuck Ellis's statement of authority, but like there seems to be a void of effective leadership in Augusta. It basically all levels. Is what I'm hearing, and that's challenging at such an important time. And you mentioned like all these things that are happening. So we haven't even felt the full brunt of all the policy that's already been passed, and it's already bad, right? And things seem to be getting worse. And this is a very dark time. And so what's interesting is like in the wake of the Charlie Kirk assassination, a number of things are happening, right? We're hearing that people are coming to know Jesus. People are going to church. They're coming to know Jesus. Our churches have more people in them, and like baptisms are up. All that kind of stuff. And you've got Christians who are starting to engage in the political realm in a way in which I don't think they have in the past, or at least, yeah, a lot of them haven't. I think a lot of Christians saw what the quote unquote religious right was doing, 10, 15, 20 years ago. And I think a lot of your evangelical church people kind of strayed away from engaging in politics. And now we're in this interesting environment where a lot of people are coming to know Jesus partly because of politics, because of the influence of Charlie Kirk. And those people are not interested in churches that are unwilling to engage in a bold way, unashamed. And so it's going to be interesting. I'm anticipating a shift in churches that may be similar to what happened when the mainstream denominations abandoned truth in favor of a social gospel, or at least that's when like they largely those churches the number of people going to those churches diminished, right? And the churches that flourished were the ones who weren't walking away from that. It's interesting. I think we're going to see something similar where churches who are willing to speak out and speak truth in the political realm are going to see themselves grow, and churches who are unwilling to do that in the evangelical movement are going to see membership decline. And so that's an interesting, but in general, I think sometimes you touched on church and state earlier, and I kind of want to spend a little bit of time on this. Is just, I know I said a lot of things and go in a bunch of different directions, but it's all connected to like Christianity and how that relates to the political. It seems to me that like I don't know how people don't see and understand the importance of Christians engaging in politics, but they seem to be like there has been this kind of resistance to that, and just can you just like share from your perspective, I guess, like what, like just on all that nonsense that I just threw out there. Like my brain, I'm trying to form a question and it's not coming, but like I think where I'm going around like. What's the role of a Christian, and why should we be engaged in the political realm, if that makes sense? And
Well, it's interesting when we talk politics and pulpit. I'll go back to what I've said all along. Is it at the end of the day, Chuck, it's not going to matter who's in the White House. It's going to matter who's in your heart. And when a heart fully commits to a walk with the Lord Jesus, you're going to see the world differently. You will. But it's not for me to tell someone what to think. My role in the pastoral role, I believe, is to help people to get them to think and to think differently of perhaps what they've always thought. Because what we've always thought and what we've always done is not working. And doing it again and again and again, trust me, That's the definition of insanity. And we keep trying to do the same thing over and over again. Within the confines of the church and state, I believe that when one listens and clearly to who they are and why they're here, you will then know what your role will be, whether it be a life of like mine that has had a touch of everything in the state of Maine, from nonprofit environmental conservatism in SAM to banking, to entrepreneurial in a Waldo County town, seeing all that I have learned and now taking that into the public square as a Christian to help change what's happening around us. So I think it becomes the individual call more than the church becoming politically active. I think, the political action comes from within the heart, and it has to be driven by the one voice within, not the screaming voices from all over the world without, which is what has created the party savagery that we're existing in now.
Well, partly what I would say that there were a lot of people in the church that discouraged me from running, from getting involved in politics, and would still, I think, like me to not be engaged in politics. Right. So like when I say the church, I don't necessarily mean that the churches themselves need to be like recruiting people. I don't, that's not what I'm saying. Like, but I think that there is a resistance in a lot of our evangelical churches to even having conversations around politics. For instance, the question: should you talk about politics before and after church when you're at your church? Oh, I can't talk about politics. That's divisive. And it's like, wait a second. What are we talking about? If we can't talk about politics within the church and with other people in the church, how are we going to find truth? If you're looking at this from a Christian perspective, even, right? Like the gospel invades everywhere, right?
Absolutely.
And so these conversations should happen, but there are a lot of people that are just afraid to have those conversations because there's this idea that, geez, if I let people know where I stand on certain political issues, they may judge me for it. They may decide not to come back to my church. We may not be able to talk about other things, right? Which is true, but at the same time, like they're gonna, if you don't ever talk about it, then you're kind of hiding who you are a little bit from them in the first place, right? Which is a little deceptive, but also like there's stuff that people need to learn and know and understand, and we can't do that without engaging in that conversation. So I don't know what I said there, but it didn't make a lot of sense. But the point is, like those conversations are really important, and true discipleship disciples throughout the entire life cycle of a person, which means we need to talk about all things. And not be afraid to talk about them. And if somebody's going to reject you and reject church and reject Christianity because of politics, well, then that just shows who their true God is, which is their political ideology, not the faith, right?
Yep. No, we have, we have a mixed congregation. We have, Democrats that come to church, and
sure,
but I have liberals that are very dear friends.
Yeah.
But at the same time, we'll have those moments but we do talk politics, and we must. Why would I not want to talk politics? Why would I not want to talk about what's happening within our world? Why would I not want to talk about abortion? Why would I not want to talk about the drug pandemic? I mean, those are things we need to talk about. And within the context of our Christianity or our religion or our spirituality and our politics, they're intertwined. They must be, and they need to be.
Yeah.
We had a Veterans Day service today, Chuck. I mentioned that to you down in Freedom. It was phenomenal. We actually have one of 5 Revolutionary War veterans, actually not just a Revolutionary War veteran, but a veteran of April 19th, 1775. There was a young man by the name of Levi Temple, who participated at the action at the Concord Bridge on that day and then fought again at Bunker Hill. He ended up settling in Maine. Long story made short, he ended up, his place of burial was Freedom, Maine. And for the last 200 years, he died in 1821. They've never been able to find the grave. Well, today the Maine Cemetery Association and the Freedom Cemetery Association placed a veterans plaque for him on the grounds of the old Freedom Academy. And his fourth generation and fifth generation granddaughters were present. And I couldn't help but feel that spirit of this was not just a veteran. This was the first veteran. This was a man who answered the call 250 years ago.
Yeah.
And to this day, the spirit of his ancestors and the spirit of those in the town trying to find this man and give him his proper place. We're very deep spiritual people, and we seem to want to forget that all the time. And as it relates to that in our politics, it must be brought back in. There's an opportunity for us as Americans to share something together. Not just freedom's first veteran, but America's first veterans. This thing of freedom goes deep. We've got to remember why we have it, how we got it, and why it's important to each of us. And I make that plea. If you're sitting on a couch watching this, or whatever you're doing, you never thought you'd want to be in politics. You never thought you could make a difference. You don't know until you try. And then you got to listen to the voice and follow it in, because you're not alone in this battle. And God promised me I would be surrounded by good people, and I'll tell you what, we are. It's a difficult battle right now, but one that's worth the fight, Chuck. It is. I said my two sons, my three children. My oldest is 41. She lives in Brewer. I have two boys, 39 and 35. Back in that timeline 20 years ago, 18 to 20 years ago, my boys became Maine's #1 export. Our young people. They left. Nothing here, Dad. We watched you work like a dog 7 days a week. Why would we want to own a general store? What's Maine got to offer us? And off they go. One ends up in Oregon, big game hunting guide, living the life of Riley, and the other one's an engineer in Denver, Colorado. Things are great, but there's something that brought them back. Maine has something to offer. Maine is an amazing place. But we are, I'll use a harsh word, we're under siege. And we got to take it back. And it's going to have to come back in the places of the ballot boxes, in the places of these venues, Chuck, and people like yourself saying we're going to get involved, and people like myself saying I'm going to get involved. But yeah, I've been 2 or 3 years now. I want to be up north bird hunting. I want to hand the torch off, but we all have to see where we're at right now. We are at a critical time. I've been 45-year Mainer, and I watched the trajectory do this. And it's not getting prettier. And what's the common denominator in those 45 years? Single party rule. It's way too much of one side.
Yeah. For the last 40 years, you're absolutely right. The Democrats, outside of like these small blips, and even when Republican LePage was there for the most part, it was only 2 years where we had House, Senate, and governorship. And so, it's been a challenge. But this is why things keep getting worse here. This is why it's so expensive. This is why, we're in this challenged situation, and hopefully we can turn the clock. We got to get you some help. So people at home, we need people to run for office. We need people to help people get elected. We need your time, energy, resources, money, whatever that might be. And we got to turn the tide so that we can actually take control of the House, take control of the Senate, get the governor, whoever the gubernatorial candidate comes out of the Republican primary. We got to get them over the top. We got to get somebody elected in CD2.
Chuck,
Paul LePage is running there. And we got CD1 and
we can get the House.
Susan Collins and
If we can get the House, we can get the constitutional officers.
Yeah. And we can stop nonsense.
You got it. Bingo.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah. Definitely. Do you have a website for your PAC, or how can people connect with you on that?
The PAC is, I've got my Paul Flynn for House Facebook page. I do not have an Answering the Call Facebook page yet, but you can reach me through the Flynn for House Facebook page or just through my legislative email and contact.
All right.
Anytime.
Well, if anybody wants to reach out and ask more questions or figure out how they can get involved and help with that pack, I mean, we do need more Christians to be involved in the political environment, because we need better people, and we know that Christians are good people. This is the reality. They have conservative values. If they're paying any attention to what the scriptures teach, I think ultimately we can turn the tide here. I think a lot of people are depressed and frustrated and angry about losing a couple of ballot initiative questions, but we have to be careful to think that like that's not the there are a lot of factors that are playing into why we lost that, and it's not representative of the people of Maine. We need to not lose hope over that. We need to work hard. We need to get people out to vote. We need to get people on the ballot, all that kind of stuff. And we have a real chance of winning in 2026. I think with how bad the Democrats have made things, the people who are running for governor are saying we've got to fix all these problems. They're all problem on the Democrat side. They're all problems that the Democrats created, right? A lot of the things that the pain that people are feeling economically, that's as a direct result of Democrat policy because they're in control. They can't blame anybody else. They're going to try. They're going to try to blame Trump for 40 years of Democrat policy somehow in the state of Maine. But that's what they're going to do. So we need to get people out. We need to speak the truth, share the truth. We need you to help. One of the ways that you can help is like, share, subscribe, all that kind of stuff. We're on all the different social media platforms. The more people who are liking, sharing, subscribing, commenting, the better it is for people to be able to see this. And the goal of people seeing this is not that Chuck Ellis' name gets lifted up. Or even Muddy Waters. It's that the people of Maine hear what's actually going on in our state, hear from people in our state. And it's really helpful to get, because we are combating against the mainstream media. And so we have to be smart about it. We have to work together. So please help. Do that. You can also, if you want to support the podcast in any way, go to muddywaters.us. You can buy coffee. You can buy all kinds of other fun little things and support the podcast. So thank you, Paul, so much for coming on. Thank you for serving in the circus that is Maine politics up there in Augusta and getting browbeat every day that you go there by the Democrats and fighting the good fight. Appreciate you.
It's an exciting time, and it's exciting to answer a call, and it's exciting to be part of it. It's exciting to know that there's a lot of people out there that are in it for the same reason. So thank you very much, Chuck. Keep doing what you're doing. I'd love to join you again anytime.
All right.
Very, very enjoyable. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And thank you all for watching, and we'll see you back here. I'm not sure when at the very least next Monday. We'll see.